Okay, so last night we ended having a little bit of difficulty with 1.4 adding and subtracting rational expressions when we had to get a common denominator. So let's look back to just simple problems that don't have any variables in them and how you get a common denominator. If I have prime numbers in my denominator, the way to get a common denominator is simply to multiply them together. So the common denominator here would be 6. If I have something like 1/10 plus 1/15, to get a common denominator, I'm going to break those numbers down into factors. Okay, so that should start to ring a bell with what we were doing when it wasn't numbers involved last night. So I'm going to break 10 down into 2 times 5. And I'm going to break 15 down into 3 times 5. And you can see that I've lined them up in columns. And I need a representative from each column to get the common denominator. So I'm going to do 2 times 3 times 5, which gives me 30. Now, a lot of you can figure out that 10 and 15 both go into 30, so you probably don't even use that process when you get a common denominator. It's not going to be as easy when we've got variables, so you have to have a process that you can use. That's why I also showed you the table last night. So I could keep dividing by a series of primes. Could divide by 2. That gives me 5, doesn't go into 15. I could divide by 5, that gives me a 1 and a 3, and then I would divide by 3. I'm looking to get 1s, and there is 2 times 5 times 3, so just another way to get that common denominator. So let's try another one. Let's suppose I've got 1/18 and 1/14. I need to get a common denominator for 18 and 14. I can make my table and start dividing by primes, so I know they're both divisible by 2. So I've got 9 and 7. I know 9 is divisible by 3, so I've got 3, bring down the 7 because 3 doesn't go into it. I'm going to divide it by 3. Oop, I got my 1, doesn't go into 7, so I'm going to bring it down. Then I got to divide by 7. I've got 1s on the bottom. Now I can multiply that column together, and that's going to give me my common denominator. Another way to do that is to break them down using a factor tree and then taking a representative of each factor. So if I have 18, 18 is 2 times 9, 9 is 3 times 3. So I've got 2 times 3 times 3. 14 is 2 times 7. So I'm going to line up my 2, but then I've got that 7 hanging out over there. And I told you to think about them as being in columns. And I've got to take a representative from each column. So I'm going to take 2 times 3 times 3 times 7. So I can use the same method to get the common denominator when I've got denominators that have variables in them. So what I've done here is broken down p squared to be p times p. I've got my 2p, and here's my 3p squared. And I've just broken them down into factors. And think about them as being in columns. So I need to take 1 from each column. So I've got 2 times 3 times p, which is 6p squared. That's going to be my common denominator. So I've got to go back and figure out what do I need to multiply each of these by so that they become 6p squared. Well, I'd have to multiply this by 6, so I've got to multiply the numerator by 6. I'd have to multiply this guy by 3, and I'd have to multiply this guy by 2. Now I've got common denominators, and I can go ahead and add. Let's suppose this is the problem that you've been given. The first step that you're always going to do is break the problem down into factors. So I've got k squared, and then if I factor that difference of 2 squares, I've got k plus 1, k minus 1. And down here in the denominator, I need two numbers that multiply to 2 that add to 3. That's going to be 2 and 1. So I've got k plus 2, k plus 1. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to tell you that that numerator is going to factor. And actually, you know what? We're not going to worry about factoring. Let's just keep it the way it is. Let's just say 2k squared minus k minus 3 for now. So I've got to look at my denominator. And I could think about it as writing those factors out in breaking them apart again. I got a k plus 1. I got a k minus 1. I've got a k plus 2 and a k plus 1. See, I line up the ones that are the same. I've got them in columns. I need a representative from each column. So I need a k plus 1, a k minus 1, and a k plus 2. So what's missing from this first one? The k plus 2 is. So that's what I would multiply by. What's missing from the second one? The k minus 1. And that's what I've got to multiply that by. I hope that helps you to see how to determine what that common denominator needs to be. Please feel free to email me with any other questions.